In the golden decades of the past, cars were crafted with a philosophy entirely different from the one we know today. Manufacturers prioritized opulence and engine power over the safety of those sitting inside. Back then, even a minor fender bender could turn a luxurious cabin into a tragic final resting place. Today, let us revisit the archives and look back at 25 strange car features that have since been strictly banned. Non-collapsible steering columns. In the past, cars featured steering systems that were incredibly sturdy but inherently deadly. The design consisted of a solid steel rod extending from the engine bay directly into the cabin, aimed right at the driver's chest. In a head-on collision, the impact would shove the engine backward, causing that steel rod to act like a spear, impaling the driver with no resistance. This rigid design caused countless tragic deaths because it lacked any ability to absorb the force of an impact. It wasn't until 1968 that authorities began banning fixed steering columns, forcing manufacturers to adopt columns that collapse or fold under pressure. This technical turning point allowed the vehicle to absorb the kinetic energy of a crash, protecting the driver's chest from fatal injuries. It remains one of the most significant milestones in automotive history, removing a grim reaper that once sat directly in front of every American driver. Today, we look back at those chrome-centered wheels with a mix of aesthetic appreciation and a chilling realization of the danger they once posed to our fathers and grandfathers. Pop-up headlights. From the 1960s to the early 1990s, pop-up headlights were the ultimate symbol of automotive cool. Legendary sports cars like the Mazda Miata, Chevrolet Corvette, and Toyota Supra featured these hidden eyes, which gave vehicles a sleek, aerodynamic profile during the day and a charming frog eye look at night. However, this iconic design eventually clashed with evolving safety standards. By the early 2000s, European regulations became increasingly strict regarding pedestrian safety. The sharp, protruding edges of pop-up headlights were deemed a severe danger to pedestrians during an accident, as they could cause far more trauma than a modern, flush-mounted light. The legendary Lotus Esprit was the final car permitted to feature this design in 2004, before it was phased out globally. While these headlights remain a beloved memory for classic car enthusiasts, they were sacrificed to protect human life. We might miss the mechanical wink of a Corvette, but modern engineering has moved toward designs that are more forgiving in a collision. It's a classic example of how the pursuit of style eventually gave way to the necessity of safety. Gas tanks behind the license plate. During the 1960s and 70s, many American cars, most notably the Ford Pinto, featured a fuel tank located directly behind the rear license plate. On the surface, this seemed like a stroke of genius for convenience. Gas station attendants could refuel the car from either side without dragging a heavy hose across the trunk. Unfortunately, this convenience masked a ticking time bomb. Because the tank was placed in such a vulnerable, exposed position right against the rear bumper, it lacked any structural protection in the event of a rear-end collision. Even a minor love tap at a stoplight could rupture the tank, leading to catastrophic fires and horrific lawsuits. This design flaw eventually forced a massive shift in automotive philosophy. Modern regulations now mandate that fuel tanks be nestled safely ahead of the rear axle, encased within the reinforced chassis. This ensures that the rear of the car can crumple without turning the entire vehicle into an inferno. We remember those old flip-down plates with a sense of nostalgia, but we certainly don't miss the terrifying risk they brought to every family road trip. Single brake circuits. Older automotive engineering often relied on a single brake circuit, meaning one solitary hydraulic line connected the brake pedal to all four wheels. While simple and cost-effective, this design harbored a fatal flaw. It lacked any redundancy. If that single line developed even a pinhole leak or suffered a mechanical failure, the entire system would lose pressure instantly. The driver would be left as a helpless observer, pressing a pedal that went straight to the floor while the car careened out of control. This was the tragic cause of many brake failure accidents on steep mountain passes and busy city streets. To eliminate this death trap, laws eventually mandated the use of dual circuit systems. Modern vehicles split the braking duties into two independent circuits. If one fails, the other remains functional enough to bring the car to a safe stop, using at least two wheels. It is a mandatory technical requirement today that we often take for granted. Looking back, it's frightening to think that our safety once depended on a single, vulnerable piece of tubing. This shift reminds us that beneath the beauty of vintage cars lay mechanical risks we would never accept today. No crumple zones, built like tanks. In the mid-20th century, there was a widespread belief that the stiffer the car, the safer the passenger. Engineers built cars like literal steel tanks using thick frames and heavy sheet metal, with the goal of keeping the vehicle's body intact after a crash. However, this was a misunderstanding of physics that led to many preventable deaths. When a rigid car hits a solid object, the kinetic energy doesn't disappear. If the car doesn't deform, that energy is transferred directly into the bodies of the people inside. This resulted in miraculous-looking accidents where the car had barely a scratch, but the passengers suffered fatal internal injuries because their organs couldn't handle the sudden stop. Modern safety science eventually gave us crumple zones areas at the front and rear of the car, designed to crush like an accordion. This intentional destruction acts as a giant shock absorber, protecting the cabin. We no longer build cars to survive the crash. We build them to sacrifice themselves so that the people inside can walk away. The era of the unbreakable steel car has passed, replaced by a much smarter, life-saving philosophy. Do you have any funny anecdotes you'd like to share about the features mentioned above? Leave a comment below. No side impact protection. If you look at the interior of a car built before the 1990s, you'll realize the doors were essentially just two thin layers of sheet metal. Their primary purpose was to keep out the rain and wind, not to provide any real structural defense. This left passengers completely vulnerable at every intersection. In a side impact collision, often called a T-bone, these flimsy doors would fold inward like paper, causing devastating injuries to the hips, chest, and head of anyone sitting on that side. There was simply nothing between the passenger and the oncoming vehicle but a few inches of air and thin metal. Today's safety standards have changed the landscape of car doors entirely. Every new vehicle must be equipped with high-strength steel side impact beams hidden inside the door panels. These beams create a protective cage that resists intrusion, spreading the force of the impact across the entire frame of the car. We might remember how light and easy those old doors were to swing open, but we now appreciate the heavy, solid thud of a modern door. It's the sound of security, a shield that generations before us never had the luxury of owning. No headrests. Vintage car interiors often resembled a stylish living room, featuring low back seats that barely reach the driver's shoulders. This design created an airy, open feeling in the cabin, almost like sitting on a sofa on wheels. However, this aesthetic came at a terrible price for the human spine. In a rear-end collision, the car is shoved forward, but the passenger's head stays in place due to inertia. Without a headrest to catch it, the head snaps back with immense force, a phenomenon known as whiplash. This often resulted in permanent paralysis or even death from a broken neck, even in relatively low-speed accidents. Since 1969, regulations have made headrests a mandatory safety feature for every seat. They aren't just there for comfort during a nap, they are essential life-saving tools designed to cradle the head and protect the delicate vertebrae of the neck. The days of the low-back bucket seat are gone, relegated to the world of classic show cars. While they looked undeniably cool in old brochures, we now know that a simple piece of padded foam is the only thing standing between us and a life-changing injury. Regular window glass. No safety glass. In the early days of the automobile, the glass used for windshields and side windows was no different from the glass in your home's windows. This was a recipe for disaster on the road. Upon impact, this standard glass would shatter into massive, razor-sharp shards. These shards acted like flying knives inside the cabin, often causing more injuries than the crash itself. It wasn't uncommon for survivors of a minor accident to be left with horrific, permanent scarring from the glass. By 1966, the industry shifted towards safety glass. Windshields became laminated, meaning a thin layer of plastic was sandwiched between two sheets of glass to hold the pieces together even when broken. Meanwhile, side windows switched to tempered glass, which is designed to explode into thousands of tiny, dull pebbles instead of sharp daggers. This innovation was a monumental victory for automotive safety, significantly reducing secondary trauma. We no longer fear the very windows that allow us to see the road. The flying knives of the past have been tamed, ensuring that even in our worst moments, the glass remains a protector rather than a threat. Protruding chrome bumpers. The 1950s was an era of excessive style, defined by massive, gleaming chrome bumpers that jutted out several inches from the car's body. These bumpers were symbols of American power and prestige, reflecting the neon lights of the diner and the pride of the owner. But for anyone walking near the car, they were a deadly menace. Because these bumpers were made of rigid, unyielding steel and often featured sharp Dagmar points, they were devastating in pedestrian accidents. They typically struck a person at the knee or shin, causing horrific fractures that were often impossible to fully heal. Over time, policymakers realized that the car's exterior shouldn't be a weapon. Modern design mandates that bumpers be integrated smoothly into the body, with no sharp or protruding edges. Materials have shifted from heavy chrome to energy-absorbing plastics and foams that are softer during a collision. The era of the shining steel jaw has ended, replaced by a design philosophy that values the safety of everyone on the road, not just those behind the wheel. We might miss the sparkle of those old Cadillacs, but the streets are undoubtedly safer without them. Rear-facing seats in wagons. For many who grew up in the 60s and 70s, the third-row rear-facing seat in a station wagon is a cherished memory. It was the kids' zone, a place where you could make faces at the drivers behind you and feel like you were in your own private world. Sadly, this nostalgic seating arrangement was arguably the most dangerous spot in the car. These seats were usually located in the cargo area, which lacked the structural reinforcement and crumple zones found in the rest of the vehicle. In a rear-end collision, there was virtually no protection for the children sitting there. Furthermore, these seats rarely had proper headrests or modern seat belts, leaving passengers defenseless against whiplash or ejection. Because of these extreme risks, rear-facing way-back seats have been phased out in favor of safer, forward-facing designs in modern SUVs and minivans. Today, every passenger must be protected by the same rigorous safety standards as the driver. We look back at those wagon rides with a smile, but we recognize that our childhood fun often teetered on the edge of a danger we never fully understood at the time. If this video brings back fond memories for you, even a small hype will mean a lot. Your support helps preserve those moments for future generations. Metal window cranks. There was something incredibly satisfying about the weight and click of a solid metal window crank. They felt like they would last forever, a testament to an era when things were built to endure. However, as automotive safety advanced, designers realized that these sturdy handles were a hidden danger inside the cabin. In a side impact collision, a passenger's body is often thrown against the door panel. Those beautiful, protruding metal cranks would act like blunt instruments, causing severe injuries to the ribs, hips, or internal organs. What was once a mark of quality became a liability. This realization led to the softening of car interiors. Manufacturers began using recessed plastic handles or eventually flush-mounted electric buttons. These modern designs are intended to break away or remain flat during a crash, minimizing the risk of secondary impact injuries. We might miss the tactile feel of winding down a window on a summer day, but the transition to safer, flatter interiors has saved countless lives. No seat belts. It seems absolutely unthinkable today, but before 1968, seat belts were not a mandatory requirement in American cars. For decades, people drove free, sitting on wide, flat bench seats with nothing to hold them in place. When seatbelts were first introduced, they were met with surprising resistance. Many saw them as a nuisance, an infringement on personal freedom, or even a danger. People argued that they would rather be thrown clear of a crash than be trapped in a car. History, however, proved them wrong in the most tragic way. Without belts, passengers became human projectiles during a crash, hitting the dashboard, the windshield, or being ejected onto the pavement. The reality of the carnage eventually led to the strict three-point belt laws we have today. A car without seatbelts is now considered a legal and safety impossibility. We might remember the days of sliding across the seat during a sharp turn, but we now know that being buckled in is the single most effective way to survive a drive. The freedom of the past was simply a lack of protection we can no longer afford to ignore. Front bench seats. The front bench seat was the heart of the romantic American car. Without a center console or gear shifter in the way, it was a wide open space where a couple could sit close together, or a family of three could sit side by side on a Friday night at the drive-in. It made the car feel like an extension of the living room. But as technology advanced, the bench seat became a safety nightmare. Integrating modern airbags to protect a middle passenger was an engineering impossibility, and bench seats provided zero lateral support to keep passengers in place during a turn or a crash. The 2013 Chevrolet Impala was the very last car to offer this feature before it was officially retired from the American market. Today, we have bucket seats that hold us firmly in place and consoles that house our life-saving technology. While we might miss the intimacy of those old bench seats, we have traded that closeness for the security of knowing every passenger is individually protected by their own dedicated safety systems. It marks the end of a social era in car culture, but the beginning of a much safer one. Metal dashboards. Entering a car from the 1950s felt like stepping into a gallery of industrial art. The dashboards were masterpieces of painted steel, polished chrome, and intricate glass dials. They were beautiful to look at and felt as permanent as a skyscraper. However, in a collision, these metal dashboards were unforgiving. Because there was no padding and no give to the material, a passenger's head or face would strike the cold, hard steel with devastating results. These unyielding interiors were a primary cause of severe head trauma and facial disfigurement. By the 1970s, safety advocates forced a radical change. Dashboards began to be constructed from energy-absorbing plastics and foam padding. These materials are designed to deform and cushion the impact, acting as a final line of defense. Today, a metal dashboard is strictly illegal in new vehicles. We may look back at those gleaming 50s interiors with a sense of wonder, but we must also remember the hidden teeth of that beautiful chrome. Safety has replaced the hard luxury of the past with a soft security that we rely on every day. Vacuum-powered windshield wipers. In the early days of automotive engineering, windshield wipers didn't run on electricity. They ran on vacuum pressure created by the engine. It was an ingenious way to use the engine's power, but it had a frustrating and dangerous flaw. The amount of vacuum pressure changed depending on how hard the engine was working. This meant that when you stepped on the gas to pass another car or climbed a steep hill in a rainstorm, your wipers would slow down or stop completely. Just when you needed the most visibility, the system would fail you. Drivers often had to let off the gas just to see the road ahead for a few seconds. This inconsistency caused countless accidents during heavy downpours. Eventually, the industry moved to independent electric motors that provide constant, reliable speed regardless of what the engine is doing. It's a small mechanical change that made a world of difference for safety. We no longer have to pray for our wipers to work while going uphill. It's a reminder of an era when driving required a constant, stressful negotiation with the machine's limitations. Have you ever had to drive uphill in the rain while praying for that lazy windshield wiper to work? Those experiences sound like a funny story now, but they must have been incredibly stressful at the time. No rear-view mirrors. In the dawn of the automotive age, looking back was a physical act. You had to literally turn your head to see if someone was behind you. As cars became faster and roads busier, mirrors were introduced, but they weren't always standard. To save on costs, many entry-level cars only came with a single mirror on the driver's side. This left a massive, deadly blind spot on the passenger side, making lane changes a game of chance. It was a time when driving felt like a gamble with fate every time you merged onto a highway. Today, the law is incredibly clear. Every vehicle must have a comprehensive system of mirrors. In most countries, you must have at least 2 external mirrors and 1 internal rear view mirror to provide a near 360-degree view of your surroundings. A car without these basic tools is considered unroadworthy and illegal to sell. We've moved from an era of guesswork to an era of total visibility. It's hard to imagine the courage or the recklessness it took to navigate the burgeoning American highway system with only half the picture in view. Protruding door handles. Vintage cars were often adorned with shiny chrome door handles that stuck out several inches from the body. These handles were designed to be easy to grab and stylish to look at, but they posed a significant risk to the world outside the car. For pedestrians or cyclists, these protruding metal bits were snag hazards. A cyclist riding too close to a parked car could have their clothing caught, leading to a dangerous fall. Or a pedestrian could suffer a deep gash if the car brushed past them. In sideswipe accidents, these handles also acted as pressure points that caused more localized damage. Modern automotive design has largely eliminated these risks. Standards now dictate that handles be recessed or flush-mounted with the car's skin. This creates a smooth exterior that allows the car to glide past objects without catching on them. It's a subtle shift in design that emphasizes the car's responsibility to the community around it. We've moved away from the jagged style of the mid-century toward a more harmonious, safer shape for the modern world. Fixed hood ornaments. There was a time when a car's identity was proudly displayed on its nose. Whether it was the Mercedes-Benz star, the Jaguar Leaper, or the Spirit of Ecstasy, these hood ornaments were symbols of prestige and craftsmanship. They were miniature sculptures that led the way down the road. However, in a pedestrian collision, these rigid metal ornaments turned into deadly spears. Striking a person with a solid metal spike, even at low speeds, could cause horrific puncture wounds and internal damage. Because of this, modern safety regulations have restricted the use of fixed ornaments. Today, if a luxury brand wants to keep their iconic mascot, it must be spring-loaded so that it folds away or retracts into the hood instantly upon impact. The jagged hood ornaments of the past are now a thing of the museum. It's a classic example of how even the most beautiful symbols of status had to be redesigned to prioritize the sanctity of human life over the elegance of a brand. Swing-out rear windows. Old-school vans, station wagons, and even some early SUVs featured swing-out rear windows. These windows were held open by a simple manual metal latch, providing a nice breeze for the passengers in the back without the complexity of a roll-down mechanism. While they were practical for ventilation, they were a disaster for safety in extreme circumstances. During a rollover accident, the immense pressure and vibration would often cause those flimsy manual latches to snap or pop open. Once the window swung wide, it created a massive hole in the vehicle's safety cage. This led to many tragedies where passengers, particularly children who weren't properly buckled, were ejected from the vehicle. Today, every window in a car must meet rigorous standards for latch strength and structural integrity. The flimsy swing-out window has been replaced by fixed glass or more robust power-operated systems. It's a change that ensures the cabin remains a sealed, protective environment, even when the world is literal turning upside down. We remember the cool breeze of those old vans, but we now prefer the closed security of the modern cabin. No anti-lock brakes ABS. Before the invention and mandate of ABS, anti-lock braking system, stopping a car in an emergency was a terrifying test of skill. If you slammed on the brakes too hard on a wet or icy road, the wheels would lock up. Once the wheels stopped spinning, the car would simply skid across the pavement like a puck on ice. Most importantly, you lost the ability to steer. No matter how much you turned the wheel, the car would continue in whatever direction it was already sliding. It was a feeling of total powerlessness. Since 2012, ABS has been a mandatory requirement for all new cars in the US. This system pulses the brakes hundreds of times per second, preventing lockup and allowing the driver to steer around obstacles even during a panic stop. It has transformed the emergency stop from a gamble into a controlled maneuver. We've moved from an era where we had to pump the brakes manually to an era where the car does the thinking for us. It's one of the greatest technological leaps in history, saving thousands of lives by giving us back control when we need it most. Looking back, every trip in the past felt like a game of chance. Do you agree? Comment yes if you've ever experienced that feeling. Exposed spare tire mounts. The image of a spare tire bolted to the rear door of a Jeep or a Land Rover is the ultimate symbol of adventure. It suggests a vehicle ready for the rugged trails of the American West. However, these exposed mounts were often a safety hazard. In the past, these mounts were often simple metal brackets that weren't designed to handle the extreme forces of a high-speed highway collision. If the bracket failed during a crash, that 50-pound tire could become a deadly projectile, flying into the windshield of the car behind or bouncing into traffic. Additionally, these tires often obscured the driver's rear view and blocked the visibility of brake lights. Because of these risks, modern regulations for external spares are incredibly strict. Many manufacturers have moved the spare tire into a dedicated compartment under the floor or inside the trunk to ensure it stays put no matter what. We might lose a bit of that rugged look, but we gain the peace of mind that comes with knowing our equipment won't become a hazard to our fellow travelers. No emission controls. Before the 1970s, the smell of the road was often the smell of unburnt fuel and toxic fumes. Cities like Los Angeles were frequently choked with thick yellow smog, so dense that it was hard to see the buildings across the street. Cars of that era had no exhaust treatment. Everything the engine burned went straight into the air we breathed. The 1970 Clean Air Act changed the course of history. It forced manufacturers to install catalytic converters and complex sensor systems to scrub the exhaust. Today, the air in our major cities is significantly cleaner than it was 50 years ago, despite there being millions more cars on the road. Modern emission controls are so effective that they remove over 90% of the toxins that once plagued our atmosphere. Driving an old, dirty engine is now a violation of environmental law. We might remember the roar of those old engines, but we certainly don't miss the coughing and the haze that came with them. It's a victory for public health that ensures future generations can breathe a little easier. No backup cameras. For a long time, the space directly behind your car was a no man's land of visibility. No matter how many mirrors you had, there was a giant blind spot where a small child, a pet, or a low obstacle could be completely hidden from view. This led to thousands of backover tragedies every year, many of them occurring in the driver's own driveway. It was a heartbreaking reality of automotive design that mirrors simply couldn't fix. Recognizing this, the US government took action. As of May 2018, every single new car sold in America must be equipped with a backup camera. This technology has turned a luxury feature into a basic human right for safety. It has effectively eliminated the blind spot nightmare, giving drivers a clear, wide-angle view of what's behind them. We've moved from an era of creeping back and hoping to an era of total confidence. It is perhaps the most simple yet effective life-saving mandate of the modern age, ensuring that we never again have to live with the regret of a tragedy that could have been avoided with a simple lens. No electronic stability control, ESC. In the old days, if you hit a patch of black ice or had to swerve suddenly to avoid a deer, you were on your own. Your survival depended entirely on your reflexes and your ability to countersteer at exactly the right moment. If you overcorrected, the car would enter a death spin or flip over. Since 2012, however, every car must have electronic stability control, ESC. This system uses a computer to monitor the car's direction. If it senses the car is sliding, it automatically applies the brakes to individual wheels to pull the car back onto its intended path. It works faster and more precisely than any human driver ever could. Statistics show that ESC has reduced single vehicle accidents by over 30%, saving thousands of lives every year. It is like having a professional stunt driver ghosting your inputs, ready to save you from a mistake you didn't even know you were making. We've moved from a time of unpredictable slides to a time where the car is actively working to keep us on the road. Leaded gasoline. While not a physical car part, leaded gasoline was the lifeblood of every engine before the 1970s. Lead was added to fuel because it made engines run smoother and protected the valves from wear and tear. It was a miracle additive for performance, but it was a poison for the human brain. As cars burned leaded gas, they spewed microscopic lead particles into the air, where they were inhaled by everyone, especially children. Research eventually linked this to a measurable drop in IQ and increased aggression in an entire generation. The global ban on leaded gasoline is considered one of the greatest public health triumphs in human history. We switched to unleaded fuel, which required engines to be built with tougher materials but saved our environment and our health. Today, leaded gas is a ghost of the past, strictly forbidden for road use. If this journey through the archives of automotive history touched your heart, a like or subscribe means the world to us. Your support keeps these memories alive for the generations to come. Which of these features do you find the most shocking? Let's reminisce in the comments below.